So our verse is, for the Lord, say it with me, seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Now, for the last few weeks, we've been learning about two men. Do you remember the two men? One is a big, strong man, and he's the leader of the country, and another is a young man. And who remembers? Chloe? Saul. And what are we learning? What have we found out about Saul? What does God see inside of Saul? What does God see inside of Saul? Chloe? Bad. What kind of bad? Can anybody remember some other things? Some kinds of bad? Sin. What kind of sin? Was he obedient? No. He was disobedient. Right. Yes. Was he submissive? No. He was rebellious. Was he responsible? When somebody said, you did wrong, what did he do? He made excuses, right? And he was the king, but he was full of pride. Even when his own son won a battle, he said, let everybody know what I have done. And who is the other man? The young man. Kaylee? David. And when God looked inside David's heart, what did he see? A man after his own heart. And we've been using a word in our lessons that we're learning about from David. Does anybody remember or know or can figure out what the word is that we've been learning about David? He was David. I'm hinting to you. I've got a great big hint in front of you. Maddie. He was godly, wasn't he? He was godly. Now, David and Saul were part of the people of Israel, and the children of Israel, the nation of Israel, had a great enemy right now. Do you remember the name of their enemy? What was the name of their enemy? Do you remember? Sin. Sin is an enemy, but these were a group of people. These people were their enemies, and they came after them a few times. We've had a couple lessons, stories about these people coming after them. One time God just thundered and it scared them, and that's how he protected them. Another time they captured the Ark of the Covenant and took it with them to their places. So who remembers the name of the people that were their enemies? Ian has got the name. The Philistines. The Philistines. Different ways to say them. So the Philistines, sometimes they would conquer the children of Israel, and when they conquered them, that meant they could walk into your town. Listen, could you imagine if they a few Philistine soldiers walked down your street and they came up to your house and they just took your mom and said, she's going to serve us. We're going to take her off to our town and she's going to cook food for us. You wouldn't have a mom. I mean, you would, but she wouldn't be in your house. Or what if they came up their street and said, you're coming with me. You're going to chop wood for my fires. Whatever. Maybe they'd come and take your sister and say, she's going to have children for me. That's awful. But that's what the Philistines were like. You wouldn't want, it wasn't just a story in the Bible. It was awful to be servants and slaves and defeated by the Philistines. And the Philistines had got their army together, and they were marching in toward the land of Israel. In fact, they were, let me see here. They were in this area, and they were heading toward Bethlehem. They were heading toward Bethlehem. Does anybody remember who lived in Bethlehem? David's dad, David's family lived in Bethlehem. How many brothers did David have? More than 6. 7. Right, there were 7 of them. God said, nope, 7 times, and then David. So Jesse, his dad, his family, and all the other people in their town, they were there, and the Philistines were marching there, and the Philistines had come to a spot on a hill, and they had all their armies there, and there was a large flat valley between them, and Saul had gotten an army of Israelites there, and they were on the hill on the other side, and this flat valley is there. There's a little stream running through the valley, and they were there kind of just staring at each other. Every once in a while, a little group would go out and try to fight, and one day, boom! 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 What is that? Hey! You sissies! You bunch of Israelite sissies! Who is making all that noise? I'm a Philistine. There's no reason for all of us to fight. You send a man to fight with me, and if I win, we will be your servants. No, you will be my servants. But if your man beats me, then we will be your servants. You guys have heard this story before. Who was that? It was a giant. And his name was Goliath. Goliath was, listen, he was over 9.5 feet tall. Now, I'm pretty sure that means that if he was in this room, his head would be bouncing off the ceiling. Way up there. Yeah, that's a big man. I wouldn't want to fight against somebody that big. Look at this guy. He has metal. He's got a bronze, coat of armor. He's got a big helmet. He even has big brass, shin guards over his legs on there. The spear to spear is huge. It's like 10 or 12 feet tall. It's heavy, but it's not heavy to him because he's a giant. Yeah. And he's in Israel. You guys are nothing. Where you got a king? What's your king's name? Oh, Saul. Saul. Send me a man to fight against me. And what do you think the Israelite soldiers did? What do you think the Israelite soldiers did? I know I'm being a little bit silly, but they weren't laughing, were they? I mean, if we had a giant coming after us and it wasn't a story, it was for real, woohoo! They were scared. Even Saul. Who could have beat that man? No one. God. God could. God beat all the Philistines before, right? But nobody was thinking about that. Even Saul. Saul was in his tent. Saul said, maybe maybe somebody will fight against this giant for us. Here's what I'll do. Anybody that will go and fight him and beat him, I will let him marry my daughter. And, well, that's pretty important. Then you'd be the king's son-in-law. And I will make his family rich. And I will make it so they never have to pay any taxes. And so word went through all the armies. Saul says, if you will fight against this giant, Goliath, that you won't have to pay any taxes for the rest of your life, and your family will be rich, and you will get to be his son-in-law. He will give you his daughter in marriage. How many soldiers jumped up to go after fighting Goliath? Nobody. Nobody. That night, boom! 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 What was it? It was the giant. And he's yelling, you bunch of sissies, no man, nobody's going to come and fight. All it's got to be me and him. We don't all have to kill each other, just me and him. Simple. Did anybody go out there to fight against him? No.
He's trying to get them to fight.
Yeah, he's trying to get them to fight. He's calling them sissies. He's saying they don't have any power. And who? Yeah, that's right. They were the children of God.
He's trying to make them mad so they can fight.
Yeah, but they didn't get mad. They got scared.
Yeah.
The Bible says they found places to hide. They were running from his voice. He's all the way on the other side of the valley. That was scary. Now listen, they went to bed. The next morning, they're cooking their coffee, getting ready, and what do you think they heard? Boom! 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 What was it? The giant. And what is he saying? Where's the man to fight against me? You guys are a bunch of sissies. You don't have anything, any reason, any way you could fight. All we got to do is fight, me and him. That's all it's got to be. Mocking, making fun of the armies of God. And if you're making fun of God's armies, you're making fun of God. Yeah, you don't want to be making fun of God. Well, remember where I said they were heading? The armies were pushing toward Bethlehem. And who lived in Bethlehem? Jesse and his sons, David. Well, 3 of Jesse's sons, the oldest ones, Eliab, Aminadab, and I forgot the other guy's name, but the 3 oldest ones, they were part of the army. They had to go down there and fight against the Philistines, otherwise the Philistines were going to come into their town. Who knows what would happen then? And so they're down there fighting, and one day, as they were fighting, what do you think happened? The giant showed up, and then, so you know how long the giant did that? Every day, every morning, every night, for 40 days. You know how long 40 days is? 40 days ago, it was January. Way back. Can you imagine, ever since January, every morning the giant comes out. Send a man to fight with me! Well, this day, Eliab and the soldier friends that were there, they were getting things set up, and they had a surprise. David showed up in town. Not in town. David showed up in the army. That morning, David's dad had said, David, get some cheese and get some food and bring this down to your brothers. Find out how things are going. Oh man, they didn't know what was going on down there. There wasn't telephones or cell phones or anything like that. So they didn't know how the battle was going, and Jesse says, find out how things are going down there. And so David goes down to the battle, and he's given the captain a big circle of cheese, and his brothers got some food for them, and boom! 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 What is it?
The giant!
The giant! And what's the giant about to say? Send me a man, you bunch of sissies, right? He is blaspheming God. He's making fun of the armies of Israel. And David heard that. Now, what do we know about David? He was a godly young man. And last week we learned that David, he trusted God, right?
Yeah.
He loved God. He believed. Did this giant believe in God? No. But David, he believed in God, He depended on God. He loved God. And when he heard God being made fun of, he said, "Who is that Philistine? What is going on?" And what do you think the soldiers told him? "This guy's been coming out for 40 days. He says, if one of us will go down there and fight against him, if we beat him, war's over, and they are our servants. But if we lose, war's over, and we're their servants." And David said, "Well, why don't somebody go fight this guy?" He said, "Well, did you see him? He's a giant. He's huge." Well, Saul said, anybody that will go fight him, he can marry his daughter, he can be very rich, and his family will never have to pay taxes. And David's like, "Well, somebody ought to go fight him. God is with us." And right then, David's brother heard him talking and said, "David, what are you doing here? You just came down to watch the battle." But why was David there? He was bringing food. His dad, what was he doing? He was obeying his dad, right? He was obeying his dad. And David said, "I'm just here obeying Dad. And this giant, he's mouthing off about our God." Well, pretty soon the soldiers, word got. Who do you think heard about David and his talking?
The giant.
No, not the giant. Who was in charge of the army? King Saul. King Saul heard that and he said, "Well, send that guy to me." And so David came before King Saul. And when he came to King Saul, Saul was looking at him. And before Saul could even say anything, David said, "Don't worry about that giant. I am your man. I will go and fight against that giant." And Saul was like, he's been fighting all his life. You've never even been in an army. David said, "That's okay. I fought against," what did he fight against? A lion and a bear. Once a lion and a bear came, and God delivered the lion and the bear into my hand, and God will deliver that heathen giant into my hand. He has no right to blaspheme God that way. Saul was like, "Okay, but you should take some armor." And Saul gave David his armor. And David was like, "I've never used this before. I don't know how to fight with armor." And he put it off, and he went down the hill, and started running out to see the giant. The Bible says he stopped at that brook that was running through there, and he got himself, some of you guys know this story, right? He got himself, how many rocks did he get out of the brook?
100.
No, he got 5. 5 smooth stones, and he put them in a pouch that he had on his side, and he had with him a sling. That's not a sling like a wrist rocket, a sling. And he knew how to use that sling. Now, I told you we're going to do some things different. I hope this is still working. I want to let this recording read from the Bible for you what happened. Starts with a song that we know. Let's see if this is going to work.
Only a boy named David, only let us sing.
That song?
Only a boy named David, but he could pray and sing. Only a boy named David, only a rippling brook. Only a boy named David, but 5 little stones he took. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands.
David was bold, wasn't he? He said, you have a big spear and a sword, but I have God. It's not over.
One little stone went in the sling, and sling went round and round. And one little stone went in the sling, and the sling went round and round. And round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And one little stone went up in the air.
Where did it go?
And the giant came tumbling down.
And listen.
And David won the victory because he trusted in God.
Yeah. Now, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? David swung his stone and it hit the giant in the head and he fell down on the ground. And David, oh, it's even better than right between the eyes. David ran up to him and he didn't have a sword, but who had a sword? The giant. So he took the giant sword and he hacked his head off. And you think, what about the Philistines? All the rest of the army. What do you think? Did they all get in line and say, okay, I guess we're your servants now? Yeah. No, they didn't. They weren't going to be. See, the devil, the enemies of God, they always lie. They tell you it'll be one way, and it's never that way. And so the armies of the Philistines, they were like, we're out of here. We're not going to be no Israelite servants. We're running. And all the armies of Israel that were hiding and scared, they ran out and they started chasing the Philistines. And God gave the Israelites a great victory. Yes. And the people of Israel did not have to be slaves and servants of the Philistines anymore. And as they were coming back, what do you think all the ladies in the towns, you think they were happy? They were happy. All the girls and all the children, they were out in the streets. They were singing. They were so happy. What do you think they were singing? The Bible tells us one of the things they were singing, Saul has killed thousands. And David, he's killed 10,000. Now, how many is 1,000 and how many is 10,000? Which is more, 1,000 or 10,000? Why did they say David killed 10,000? Because he killed the giant. He only killed the giant, but he protected them. I mean, he might have killed some other Philistines after that, but they were so happy and so thankful that David had protected them and delivered them. They were singing like that. And what do you think happened when Saul heard them singing their happy songs? Now everybody's happy, right? Yes. Except Saul. Saul's like, okay, he might as well be king. Yes. People are saying he's killed 10,000 and I only killed 1,000. What is that? He's upset because people are happy. Where did that come from? The word is jealous. Saul was envious and jealous. Pretty soon, anytime he looked at David, he was like, I hate David. Now, David just saved the country. But I don't like, David's going to have to die. I can't have him around my kingdom. He was full of jealousy. And you remember what David did for Saul? What did David do for Saul? Where's my picture? When Saul was upset and angry, what would he do? He would play his harp for him. So, the battle is over, everybody's back to their hometowns, and David is back in the palace with Saul, and Saul is upset and angry. But why is Saul upset and angry now? Because his kingdom is happy, because he's jealous. He's envious. he's there looking at David playing that harp, and pretty soon Saul takes his spear that's next to him and he throws it at David. And David leaped out of the way and he ran out there. Woo! That was a close call. You need to play a nicer song next time maybe, huh? So that he doesn't get so angry. The next day, Saul was like, his servants were like, Saul needs some music, David. Go in there and play. So David's in there playing music. And again, 2 days, second time, Saul took his spear, his javelin, and threw it at David, and David escaped. Saul began a life of hatred and misery toward David because he was jealous. The Bible says some people told Saul, your daughter, Michal, she really likes David. Now, Saul had already promised that whoever killed Goliath would have his daughter, but that didn't happen. Saul was not a godly man. He didn't keep his word. But he thought, oh, Michal loves him. I know what I'll do. I'll tell David that if he goes and kills 100 Philistines, then he can marry my daughter. What is he thinking? He could kill a giant, but he's not going to be able to kill 100 Philistines. And I'll just let the Philistines kill him. Then I won't have to worry about him. That's not a good thing, is it? But David's like, all right, I like his daughter. So he went out, he killed 200 Philistines. Said, I got 200 Philistines. Oh, man. And none of them killed David. Saul is in trouble, isn't he? Yeah. So, what is going to happen? We're going to have to find out later. No. Remember the name of Saul's son? Jonathan? Jonathan was a good man, wasn't he? We're going to tell you something about Jonathan and David next week. But this week, we need to remember that with God, we can win the victory, right? Even if it's a big problem. It's a big problem that we don't know how to solve. It's somebody at school that's mean. It might be a teacher that hates God. We don't need to bring our slingshot into school. But God can take care of teachers that hate him. We just have to do what's right, depend on, and trust God, and God will get himself the victory for us. We just can't run and hide and say, well, I don't know God. We have to be faithful to him like David was. And then we have to not be surprised if people don't like us. Because lots of people don't like God, do they? Most of the world doesn't like God. They hate God. You should be thankful that God let you be in a place where you could come and learn the Bible so that you can love God. But we remember those things and keep doing what's right. We should be trying to live a godly life all the time. Whether we're at school, whether we're at home, whether we're down the street, if we're at the store, we should be doing things that are godly.